He called me useless at Christmas Eve dinner, in front of everyone. The laughter that followed, the suffocating silence from those who said nothing, the burning humiliation it all seared into my memory like a brand. My father-in-law's words echoed through the candle-lit dining room while 20 guests watched my shame. But what none of them knew, what I'd kept hidden beneath my modest dress and quiet demeanor, was that my startup had just sold for $95 million. And before this night ended, before the clock struck midnight, they would all understand exactly who they had underestimated. My name is Natalie Rhodes, and I've never felt smaller than I did at 7:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve, sitting at the Harrington family's mahogany dining table while Edward Harrington raised his crystal champagne flute for what I thought would be another one of his pompous toasts. The estate sprawled across 10 acres in suburban Richmond, Virginia, every inch of it screaming old money that wasn't quite as old as they pretended. The dining room where we gathered glowed with the warm light of a massive chandelier, its crystals catching the flicker of the fireplace that roared at the far end. The smell of roasted turkey mingled with expensive wine and Caroline's overwhelming perfume, Chanel No. 5. She never let anyone forget. 23 guests filled the room, their voices creating a symphony of privileged chatter. Silverware clinked against fine china plates decorated with gold trim. The Christmas tree in the corner stood 15 feet tall, wrapped in white lights and silver ornaments that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "To success," Edward began, his voice commanding immediate silence. He stood at the head of the table, his navy suit impeccable, his gray hair slicked back with precision. "To those who contribute, who build, who matter in this world." His eyes swept the room, pausing on his daughter Evelyn, who preened in her designer red dress, then on his son Marcus, my ex-husband, who had brought his new girlfriend, a blonde investment banker named Victoria. Then his gaze landed on me. "And then there are those who are, well, let's call them what they are, useless." He chuckled, a sound like grinding glass. "Like our Natalie here, small-town nobody who couldn't even keep her marriage together. Tell me, Natalie, what exactly do you do these days, still playing with your little computer programs?" The room erupted in uncomfortable laughter, some genuine, from those who enjoyed blood sport at dinner parties, some nervous, from those who at least had the decency to recognize cruelty when they saw it. Evelyn smirked behind her wine glass. "Daddy, be nice. Not everyone can marry into success like I did." She touched her husband Richard's arm, a hedge fund manager who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I'm just being honest," Edward continued, warming to his theme. "When Marcus brought her home, I told him, didn't I tell you? Son, I said she'd never fit into our world. No breeding, no connections, no understanding of how things work. And look, I was right. 3 years of marriage, and what did she accomplish? Nothing. Absolutely nothing of value." My fingers gripped the stem of my wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. The burgundy liquid trembled, creating tiny waves that matched the tremor in my hands. I kept my eyes down, counting the embroidered poinsettias on the tablecloth. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Edward, perhaps—" Caroline started, her southern accent thick with fake concern. No, let me finish." He interrupted his wife. "This is important. Success isn't democratic. Some people have it, some don't. Natalie here. Bless her heart. She's a perfect example of someone who doesn't. Probably never will." Marcus shifted in his seat, but said nothing. Of course he didn't. He never defended me during our marriage. Why would he start now? The silence that followed felt like drowning. Every eye in the room turned to me, waiting to see if I'd cry, if I'd run, if I'd finally break the way Edward had been trying to break me since the day Marcus first brought me to this house 5 years ago. I set down my glass carefully, deliberately. The soft thud it made against the table seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. "Excuse me," I managed, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest like a furnace. "I need some air." As I stood, Edward's laughter followed me. C can't even handle a little truth, weakness, through and through. The walk to the front door felt like miles. My modest black dress, the nicest thing I owned that wasn't jeans and a hoodie, swished against my legs. My flats clicked against the marble floor, each step a small rebellion against the designer heels every other woman wore. Behind me, the conversation resumed, louder now, energized by the spectacle of my humiliation. Someone made a joke about participation trophies. Another voice, Evelyn's friend Patricia, wondered aloud why I even still came to family gatherings. The cold December air hit my face as I pushed through the heavy front door, and for the first time in 3 hours, I could breathe. The snow crunched under my feet as I walked to my 8-year-old Honda Civic, the one Evelyn always called that embarrassing little car. But sitting in that driver's seat, watching my breath fog the windshield, I let myself remember everything Edward Harrington didn't know about me. 4 years ago, while I was still married to Marcus, I co-founded Lunametric with my college roommate, David Park. We built it in my garage, writing code until 3 or 4 a.m. Surviving on instant ramen and the kind of determination that comes from having everyone doubt you. Lunametric started as a simple idea. What if logistics companies could predict supply chain disruptions using AI before they happened? Not just weather delays or traffic patterns, but everything: political upheavals, social media trends that would spike demand, even subtle market indicators that humans would miss. David handled the business side while I built the algorithms, writing millions of lines of code that would eventually revolutionize how Fortune 500 companies moved their products around the world. The first year was hell. We pitched to 47 investors. 46 said no. The 47th gave us $50,000, barely enough to keep the servers running. I remember eating peanut butter straight from the jar for dinner, telling myself it was protein. Marcus would come home from his comfortable job at his father's company, see me hunched over my laptop, and shake his head. "You're wasting your life on this," he'd say. "Why can't you just be normal? Get a real job." By year 2, we had 3 employees and a cramped office above a Chinese restaurant. The smell of General Tso's chicken became the scent of progress. We worked 18-hour days, sleeping on air mattresses when we couldn't make it home. My marriage crumbled while I debugged code and refined machine learning models. "You love that company more than me," Marcus accused during one of our final fights. He was right. I did. When we divorced, Edward laughed, called it inevitable. "That girl never had her priorities straight," he told anyone who'd listen, probably playing some silly computer game while my son needed a real wife. But 3 months ago, everything changed. Global Tech, one of the biggest tech conglomerates in the world, had been watching Lunametric. Our algorithms had achieved 94% accuracy in predicting supply chain disruptions. We were saving companies millions, sometimes billions, by preventing logistics nightmares before they happened. The call came on a Tuesday at 11:15 a.m. David put them on speaker in our conference room, which was really just a slightly larger closet with a whiteboard. "We want to buy Lunametric," they said. All of it. The number they offered made David drop his coffee. $95 million. I signed the papers 3 weeks ago. December 3rd, in a law office that occupied the entire 40th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. The lawyers in their $2,000 suits kept calling me Ms. Rhodes with a deference I'd never experienced. My signature on those documents made me worth more than Edward Harrington would ever be. But I told no one. Not my mother in Ohio, not my sister in Seattle, certainly not anyone connected to the Harringtons. I kept wearing my Target jeans and shopping at discount stores. I stayed in my rented townhouse with its peeling paint and temperamental heating. I drove my Honda with 200,000 miles on it. Why? Because I needed to know who really saw me, who valued me for me, not for my bank account. And because I wanted to choose the perfect moment to reveal the truth. David thought I was crazy. "You could buy a mansion tomorrow," he said. "A Ferrari. Hell, 10 Ferraris." "I could," I agreed, "but I have something more important to buy first." "What's that?" "Revenge." He didn't understand then. How could he? David grew up loved, supported, believed in. He never had someone like Edward Harrington telling him he was worthless. He never sat through dinners where every accomplishment was dismissed, every dream mocked. The truth was, the money was nice. The success was validating. But what I really wanted, what had driven me through those sleepless nights and empty stomach days, was this: to see Edward Harrington's face when he realized that the useless woman he'd humiliated had just become everything he pretended to be: truly successful, truly powerful, truly untouchable. I started my car, the engine coughing to life in the cold. Through the frosted windshield, I could see the warm glow of the Harrington estate, all those windows full of people who thought they knew my worth. They had no idea what was coming. The Harringtons lived their entire lives as a performance, and I'd had a front row seat to the show for 5 years. Sitting in my car, I could picture them all so clearly, each playing their carefully rehearsed role in the family theater of superiority. Edward Harrington, the patriarch, built his supply chain company 30 years ago and never stopped reminding everyone. He wore his success like armor Armani suits, a Rolex that he'd adjust constantly so the light would catch it, a country club membership he'd mention within 5 minutes of any conversation. But I'd seen the papers Marcus left out during our marriage. The company hadn't grown in a decade. They were bleeding clients to younger, more innovative competitors. Edward's refusal to modernize, to embrace technology, real business is done with handshakes, not computers, was killing them slowly. Caroline Harrington, his wife, existed entirely in the realm of appearances. She spent her days at the Richmond Ladies Auxiliary, planning charity galas that raised less money than they cost to throw. Her closet contained enough designer clothes to stock a boutique, yet she constantly complained about making do and tightening belts. She had this way of looking at me, like I was tracking mud through her perfect life just by existing. "Natalie, dear," she'd say, her voice dripping honeyed poison, "wouldn't you be more comfortable in something more appropriate?" This while eyeing my department store dress like it might contaminate her Persian rugs. Then there was Evelyn, Marcus's sister, who had elevated spite to an art form. She'd married Richard Worthington III. Yes, he included the third in his email signature purely for his last name and bank account. She spent her days shopping, posting on Instagram, and finding new ways to remind everyone that she'd married properly. At every family dinner, she'd managed to work in mentions of their new boat, their ski house in Aspen, Richard's latest bonus. But I knew the truth Marcus had drunkenly revealed one night: Richard kept her on an allowance. She had to ask permission for any purchase over $500. The extended family was no better. Edward's brother Thomas, who'd failed at 3 businesses but still lectured everyone about entrepreneurship because he'd read a few self-help books. Caroline's sister Margaret, who collected gossip like others collected stamps and dispensed it with surgical precision to cause maximum damage. The cousins who showed up for holidays in their leased BMWs, maxed out credit cards hidden behind Tom Ford sunglasses. They all shared the same fatal flaw: they believed their own mythology. They'd convinced themselves that they were rich, successful, untouchable. But I'd done my homework these past weeks, preparing for tonight. The Harrington estate mortgaged 3 times. Edward had been refinancing every few years, pulling out equity to maintain their lifestyle. The country club membership 2 months behind on dues. I'd found this out from David's cousin who worked in their billing department. Edward's company, Harrington Logistics. They'd lost their biggest client last month to a competitor using AI-driven supply chain management, ironically, using a watered-down version of what Lunametric had perfected. The vacation home in the Outer Banks that Caroline loved to mention, listed for sale quietly, through a discreet broker who specialized in distressed sales for people trying to save face. Even their Christmas party, this grand display of excess, was smoke and mirrors. The catering was from the third cheapest option in town. I recognized the menu from when I'd planned office parties on a budget. The champagne they were serving was decent, but not the premium vintage Edward claimed. The live pianist playing in the parlor was actually a Spotify playlist I'd caught the brief audio skip when someone's phone interfered with the Bluetooth connection. But the saddest part? They genuinely believed no one noticed. They thought their performance was flawless, that everyone bought into their fantasy of old Southern wealth and business dynasty. They mistook politeness for belief, silence for respect, attendance for admiration. Marcus had inherited this delusion entirely. During our marriage, he'd constantly talked about maintaining standards while living paycheck to paycheck from his vice president title at Daddy's company, a position that paid half what he could have earned elsewhere, but came with the family name on his business card. He'd rather struggle under his father's thumb than succeed on his own merits. Image is everything, he'd tell me when I suggested we skip a Harrington party to work on my startup. You have to play the game. But that was the difference between us. The Harringtons played at being wealthy and successful. I had actually become it. They wore their fake success on the outside, desperate for everyone to see. I hid my real success under Target clothing and an old Honda, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. Tonight, their obsession with appearances would be their downfall, because once I revealed the truth, they'd have to face it in front of their entire social circle. All their carefully cultivated images would shatter in public, with no way to spin it, no way to save face. The thought made me smile for the first time all evening. The snow was falling harder now, thick flakes coating my windshield in a blanket of white. I turned off the engine and sat in the darkness, letting the cold seep in. It sharpened my thoughts, crystallized the rage that had been simmering for years into something harder, more useful. I closed my eyes and heard Edward's voice again. Useless. The word echoed in the silence of my car, bouncing off memories of every slight, every dismissive glance, every whispered comment I was meant to overhear. There was the time Caroline forgot to set a place for me at Thanksgiving, claiming she thought I wouldn't come since Marcus and I had been having troubles. I ate standing up in the kitchen while the family dined in the formal room. There was Evelyn's birthday party where she introduced me to her friends as Marcus's charity case he always did like rescue projects. The laughter that followed still made my jaw clench. There was the company picnic where Edward introduced all the family members to his business partners except me. When someone asked who I was, he said, "Nobody important." Each memory was a match, and tonight, Edward had thrown gasoline on years of accumulated kindling. Something shifted in me as I sat there, my breath visible in the frigid air. For 3 years of marriage and 2 years since the divorce, I'd accepted their treatment. I'd told myself it didn't matter, that success would be my revenge. But success in silence wasn't revenge, it was just success. They needed to know. They needed to feel what I'd felt. They needed to understand that the person they'd dismissed as worthless had been playing a different game entirely, one they couldn't even comprehend. I pulled out my phone, the screen bright in the darkness. 9:43 p.m. The main course would be finishing soon. They'd move to dessert and coffee. Then Edward would hold court in the parlor with his Cuban cigars and brandy, telling the same tired stories about his business triumphs from 2 decades ago. But not tonight. Tonight, the script would change. I scrolled through my contacts to Rebecca Martinez, my attorney. She answered on the second ring, even though it was Christmas Eve. Natalie, everything okay? Remember that contingency plan we discussed, the nuclear option? There was a pause. The Harrington situation. Yes. You're sure once we do this, there's no going back? Why, I watched the snow accumulate on the hood of my car, each flake adding to the weight. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. What triggered it? Does it matter? Rebecca sighed. For the paperwork. No. For your conscience later. Maybe. My conscience is clear. They made their choice tonight. Now I'm making mine. All right. I'll need about an hour to prepare everything. The courier service we have on retainer can deliver within 90 minutes. Even on Christmas Eve, we pay them enough for that kind of availability. Perfect. Have them arrive at exactly 11:55 p.m. That's very specific. I want it to happen before midnight, while it's still Christmas Eve, while everyone is still gathered, still drunk on their own superiority. I want them to remember this Christmas Eve forever. Natalie. Rebecca's voice carried a warning. Revenge like this, it changes you. No, I said quietly. Being treated like nothing for years changes you. This is just me finally acknowledging the change. After I hung up, I called James Thompson, my financial advisor. He was at his own family gathering, but he stepped outside to talk. Ms. Rhodes, is there an emergency? I need you to execute the share purchases we've been tracking. All of them. Tonight. Tonight, the markets are closed. The private sale agreements we negotiated, the Harrington Logistics shareholders who agreed to sell pending my final approval, execute all of them. That's 47% of the company, combined with the 18% you already acquired through the shell corporations. You'll have controlling interest. 65%, I confirmed. More than enough. The transfer will be irrevocable once I send the wire confirmations. Send them. This will cost you approximately $12 million. I'm aware. Ms. Rhodes, if I may ask why tonight, why not wait until after the holidays when... Because tonight they showed me exactly who they are, and tonight I show them exactly who I am. There was silence on the line. Then, understood. I'll handle it immediately. I ended the call and sat back in my seat. Through the snow-hazed windows of the estate, I could see figures moving in the dining room. They were all still there, still laughing, still celebrating their perceived superiority. Edward was probably telling his favorite story about crushing a small competitor 15 years ago. Caroline was likely pretending to be gracious while calculating everyone's net worth. Evelyn was surely documenting everything for social media, crafting the perfect image of family prosperity. Let them laugh, let them toast, let them feel secure in their castle built on debt and delusion. In 70 minutes, everything would change. I started my car again, not to leave, but to warm up. I had calls to make, documents to review on my phone, final preparations to ensure everything would happen exactly as planned. This wasn't a spontaneous decision born of tonight's humiliation. This was the culmination of months of planning, triggered by Edward's cruelty. He thought he'd broken me when I left the table. He thought he'd won, but I hadn't left in defeat. I'd left to arm myself for war. My phone became a command center as I sat in the driver's seat, orchestrating what would be the most memorable Christmas Eve of the Harringtons' lives. The windows were fogging from my breath, creating a cocoon of privacy as I worked. First, I pulled up the documents Rebecca had been preparing for weeks. The share purchase agreements, each one meticulously negotiated with minority shareholders of Harrington Logistics who'd grown tired of Edward's mismanagement. They'd been eager to sell once they learned a serious buyer was interested, though none knew the buyer's identity. The shell corporations I'd established ensured that. I reviewed the contract with Tom Bradley, Edward's former business partner who owned 12%. He'd sold to me after Edward forced him out 5 years ago. Anyone but Edward, he'd said during our secret meeting. I don't care if you burn it to the ground. Then there was Jennifer Walsh, Edward's own cousin, who'd inherited 8% from her father. She needed money for her daughter's medical bills, and Edward had refused to buy her out at a fair price, offering her 30 cents on the dollar. I'd paid full value. The list went on. Disgruntled employees with stock options, former board members Edward had alienated, even Margaret Patterson, Caroline's own sister, who'd quietly sold me her 3% after Caroline had humiliated her at last year's Christmas party over her divorce. My phone buzzed. Rebecca again. The courier has the documents. Physical copies as you requested, not just digital. The sale confirmations, the ownership certificates, the new board structure documentation. Everything. And the special edition I requested, The forensic accounting report on Harrington Logistics. Yes, all 47 pages detailing the financial irregularities, the hidden debt, the inflated valuations Edward's been reporting to shareholders. My contact at the SEC will be very interested in that come Monday morning. Perfect. What about the other matter? The lien documentation on the estate. Also included. Turns out when Edward took that third mortgage, he used company assets as collateral without proper board approval. As majority shareholder, you now have standing to call that loan due immediately. I smiled in the darkness. And the timeline. The courier will arrive at 11:55 p.m., as requested. He's been instructed to ask for Mr. Edward Harrington specifically and to say, loudly, that he has urgent legal documents requiring immediate attention from the new majority owner of Harrington Logistics. Make sure he says new majority owner clearly. Already specified. Natalie, this is thorough. 5 years of their condescension buys a lot of thoroughness. After ending the call with Rebecca, I opened my laptop, which I'd grabbed from my car's trunk. Using my phone as a hotspot, I logged into the corporate registry database. The share transfers were already reflecting. As of 10:27 p.m., on December 24th, I officially owned 65% of Harrington Logistics. I pulled up the company's internal systems. My new ownership gave me full access. Edward's emails, his financial records, his desperate attempts to secure loans to keep the company afloat. I found the folder labeled Confidential Board Only and nearly laughed. He'd been hiding the true state of the company from everyone, including his own family. They were 3 months from bankruptcy without a massive cash infusion, which I could provide, or not. Next, I composed an email to the entire board of directors, scheduled to send at midnight. Effective immediately, an emergency board meeting is called for December 26th at 9 a.m. As the new majority shareholder, I will be presenting a complete restructuring plan for Harrington Logistics. Attendance is mandatory. Failure to attend will be considered resignation from the board. Additionally, please be advised that a comprehensive audit of all company finances from the past 5 years will commence January 2nd. Full cooperation is expected and required. Regards. Natalie Rhodes, majority owner, Harrington Logistics. I attached the forensic accounting report to the email. Let them sweat through Christmas Day. My phone rang. James Thompson. It's done. All wire transfers confirmed. You are officially the majority shareholder. The previous shareholders have been notified that the sales are complete and irrevocable. Any issues? None. Though I should mention, Tom Bradley called me personally to say, and I quote, "Tell her to give Edward hell." Oh, I intend to. There's one more thing. That investigation you had me conduct into the Harrington Family Trust. Yes. It's worse than we thought. The trust is nearly empty. Edward has been borrowing against it for years to maintain their lifestyle. The only significant asset left is the house, and that's mortgaged to the hilt. So, when I call in the company loan that's secured by the estate, they'll have 72 hours to pay or vacate. I closed my laptop and checked the time on my phone. 11:38 p.m. 17 minutes until the courier arrived. I reapplied my lipstick in the rearview mirror, the same drugstore brand Caroline had once mockingly complimented as surprisingly decent for the price point. I smoothed my hair, straightened my modest black dress. It was time to go back inside. But first, I sent one final text to David Park. Remember when you asked why I kept going to Harrington family events after the divorce? You're about to find out. Check the news tomorrow. His response was immediate. Natalie, what did you do? What I should have done years ago. I bought them. I walked back into the Harrington estate at 11:47 p.m., snow dusting my shoulders like fallen stars. The warmth hit me immediately, along with the sound of drunken laughter from the parlor. They'd moved on to dessert and after-dinner drinks, just as I'd predicted. Oh, look, she's back, Evelyn announced loudly as I entered the parlor. Did you finish your little cry in the car? 23 faces turned toward me. Some amused, some pitying, most indifferent. Edward stood by the fireplace, a cognac in one hand and a cigar in the other, holding court with 3 of his business associates. "Natalie," Caroline said with false concern, "we saved you some dessert. It's in the kitchen if you'd like." "Actually," I interrupted, my voice carrying across the room, "I'll stay right here. I wouldn't want to miss what's about to happen." Edward laughed. "What's about to happen? Are you going to grace us with another dramatic exit, or perhaps finally admit that you don't belong here?" I walked to the center of the room, every eye following me. "You're right, Edward, I don't belong here." Finally, some self-awareness. He smirked, taking a sip of his cognac. "I don't belong here because I outgrew this room the moment I realized what small, petty people you all are. But since you brought up the topic of who's useless tonight, I thought we should discuss it properly." Marcus stepped forward from where he'd been standing with Victoria. "Natalie, don't do this. Just leave." "Oh, I'm not going anywhere. Not yet." I checked my phone. 11:52 p.m. In fact, none of us are going anywhere for the next few minutes. "What are you talking about?" Edward's voice had an edge now, the first hint of uncertainty. "You called me useless tonight. Said I've accomplished nothing of value. Tell me, Edward, what would you consider valuable? $1 million, 10 million, 50. "Money isn't everything," Caroline interjected, though her diamonds suggested otherwise. "You're right, Caroline. It's not everything. Power is so much more interesting." I pulled out my phone, holding it up. "For instance, the power to destroy everything someone has built with a single email." "Are you threatening us?" Edward stepped forward, his face reddening. "You pathetic little—" The doorbell rang. Everyone froze. The estate's doorbell was a massive orchestral chime that echoed through the entire house. At 11:55 p.m., on Christmas Eve, it sounded like Judgment Day. "Who could that be?" Caroline whispered. I smiled. "Why don't you answer it? Edward, I believe it's for you." Edward shoved his cognac at Thomas and strode to the door. We could all hear the exchange from the parlor. "Mr. Edward Harrington," a loud official voice. "Yes, I have urgent legal documents requiring your immediate attention. These are regarding the transfer of majority ownership of Harrington Logistics to Ms. Natalie Rhodes." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the Persian rug. Edward's voice, when it came, was strangled. "What did you say?" "Ms. Natalie Rhodes is now the majority owner of Harrington Logistics. Sir, these documents confirm the sale and transfer of 65% of company shares, executed tonight at 10:27 p.m. There are also additional documents regarding company assets and liens that require your immediate review." I walked to the foyer where Edward stood frozen, his face cycling through shades of red and purple. The courier, a young man in a sharp suit, handed him a thick manila envelope. "That's impossible," Edward said. The shareholders would never—" "They would, and they did," I said calmly. "Tom Bradley sends his regards. By the way, he was particularly eager to sell to me. Something about you forcing him out 5 years ago. Tom wouldn't— 12% from Tom, 8% from your cousin Jennifer, you remember, the one whose daughter needed surgery, the one you tried to lowball 3% from Margaret." I glanced at Caroline. "Your own sister, Caroline. She was quite happy to sell after last year's Christmas party." Caroline's face went white. "Margaret wouldn't dare. She would, and she did." Along with 14 other shareholders who were tired of Edward running the company into the ground. I turned back to Edward. "Oh, and the 18% I already owned through various shell companies I've been acquiring for the past 6 months. That was just the cherry on top." "You're lying," Marcus said, pushing forward. "You don't have that kind of money. You're nobody." "You're worth $95 million as of 3 weeks ago," I said, letting each word land like a hammer. "My startup, Lunametric, sold to Global Tech. The announcement will be public on Monday, but I thought you should hear it from me first." Evelyn's champagne glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the marble floor. "But that's not the best part," I continued, pulling a document from the courier's envelope. This is a forensic accounting report on Harrington Logistics. 47 pages detailing every financial irregularity, every hidden debt, every inflated valuation you've been reporting. Edward, the SEC will find it fascinating reading. You can't. I can, and I have. As majority owner, I've called an emergency board meeting for December 26th. You'll be there. Edward, you'll sit there while I outline exactly how I'm going to restructure your company, or rather, my company. The grandfather clock in the corner began to chime midnight, each bell tolling like a funeral dirge for the Harrington Empire. The grandfather clock finished its 12 chimes, and in the silence that followed, I pulled out the document that would destroy them completely. There's more, I said, holding up the paper so everyone could see the official seal. Edward, did you tell your family that you used the estate as collateral for a company loan? Without board approval? Caroline gasped. Edward, you didn't. As majority shareholder, I have the right to call that loan due immediately. I looked directly at Edward, whose face had gone from purple to ashen. You have 72 hours to pay back $4.7 million or vacate the premises. This is our home, Caroline shrieked. You can't. I can. It's all perfectly legal. Your husband made sure of that when he signed the papers. I turned to address the room full of stunned guests. The Harrington Empire you all admire so much, it's built on debt, lies, and borrowed time. The company has been hemorrhaging money for 3 years. They're months from bankruptcy. You're destroying us out of spite, Edward managed to choke out. No, Edward, you destroyed yourselves out of greed and arrogance. I'm just shining a light on the wreckage. I pulled another document from the envelope. This is the new company structure, effective immediately. You're removed as CEO. You'll retain a position as consultant if you behave. Your salary will be what you paid me when I worked there part-time during my marriage to Marcus. Remember minimum wage because I was just playing around with computers. Thomas, Edward's brother, tried to step forward. Now, let's all calm down. Surely we can discuss this like civilized. I laughed. Where was civility when Edward called me useless in front of everyone? Where was civility when Caroline forgot to set a place for me at Thanksgiving? Where was civility when Evelyn introduced me as Marcus's charity case? I walked over to Evelyn, who stood frozen by the fireplace. Speaking of which, Evelyn, you should know that Richard's family trust invested heavily in Harrington Logistics. With the company's real valuation now exposed, their portfolio just took a massive hit. You might want to reconsider that new boat you've been planning to buy. Richard. Evelyn turned to her husband, who looked like he might be sick. And Marcus, I said, turning to my ex-husband. Your vice president position. It doesn't exist anymore. The new structure has no place for nepotism. You'll need to interview for any position you want, and your qualifications will be assessed by an independent panel. Given that your only experience is working for Daddy, I wouldn't be optimistic. Victoria, his new girlfriend, took a step away from him, suddenly reassessing her investment. But here's the beautiful part, I continued, addressing the entire room. I'm not going to destroy Harrington Logistics. I'm going to save it. I'm going to bring it into the 21st century. Implement the AI systems Edward was too proud and too stupid to understand. In 2 years, it'll be worth triple what it is now. Then why? Someone started to ask. Because you all need to watch from the sidelines while the useless nobody turns Edward's failing company into a success he could never achieve. You'll read about it in the business papers. You'll see me on the cover of Forbes. And you'll know that everything good that happens to Harrington Logistics from now on happened because of me, not despite me. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen. This email just went out to all board members and major investors. By morning, everyone in Richmond's business community will know about the change in ownership. The press release goes out Monday. Tech entrepreneur Natalie Rhodes acquires majority stake in Harrington Logistics, plans major restructuring. You vindictive little... Edward started forward, but Thomas held him back. Vindictive, I considered the word. No, Vindictive would be releasing these photos from the company Christmas party 2 years ago. So I held up my phone, showing Edward with his arm around his secretary in a very non-professional way. Caroline, did you know about Jessica? She's 23, by the way, younger than your own daughter? Caroline turned on Edward with fury in her eyes. Jessica. That little vindictive would be sending the IRS the real books, not the ones you've been submitting. I pulled out another document. Yes, Edward, I have those too. Your accountant, Mr. Peterson. He was very cooperative once he learned about the forensic audit. He didn't want to go down with your sinking ship. The room erupted in chaos. Caroline was screaming at Edward. Evelyn was demanding answers from Richard. The business associates were backing toward the door. The cousins and family friends were pulling out their phones, either recording the drama or checking their own investments. I stood in the center of it all, calm as the eye of a hurricane. "Stop!" Edward roared, and the room quieted. He turned to me, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "What do you want Moneymore shares? What will it take to make this go away?" "What do I want?" I smiled. "I already have it. I wanted you to know that the person you called useless owns you now. Your company, your reputation, your future. It's all in my hands." I raised my champagne glass, the same glass I'd gripped so tightly earlier when Edward humiliated me. The room fell silent, everyone frozen in their positions of shock, rage, and disbelief. "A toast," I said, my voice cutting through the tension, "to success, to those who contribute, who build, who matter in this world." I repeated Edward's words from earlier, each one landing like a slap. "And to those who are useful," I took a sip, then set the glass down with deliberate precision. "Now, let me be clear about how this will work going forward. Edward, you will announce your retirement at the board meeting. You'll cite health reasons, stress, perhaps? Very believable given how you look right now." Edward's fist slammed on the mahogany side table. "I built that company from nothing and ran it into the ground. But don't worry, your name will still be on the building. I'm not petty enough to change that. I want everyone to know that Harrington Logistics succeeded only after a Harrington stopped running it." I turned to Evelyn. "Your consulting contract with the company terminated. That $50,000 a year you've been collecting for doing nothing gone. You'll need to find actual work for the first time in your life." "You can't," she started. "I can check Section 12 of your contract. Majority owner discretion." I pulled out my phone. "Oh, and that Instagram post you made an hour ago, the one bragging about your family's empire, might want to delete that. It's aging poorly." Caroline stood up, trying to salvage some dignity. "We'll fight this. We'll get lawyers." "With what money?" I asked simply. "The $4.7 million you need to pay in 72 hours, the legal fees that will cost hundreds of thousands, the company credit cards that I've already frozen. Face it, Caroline, you're broke. The only reason you're not on the street is because I'm giving you 72 hours to figure it out." I walked toward the door, then turned back for my final words. "You know what the ironic part is? If you had just been kind, if you had just treated me like a human being instead of something beneath you, none of this would have happened. I would have quietly built my success and left you to your delusions. But you couldn't help yourselves. You had to crush someone you saw as weak." I looked directly at Edward. "You called me useless. But tonight, I'm the most useful person you've ever met. I'm useful enough to show you who you really are, a failed businessman clinging to past glory. I'm useful enough to save your company from the bankruptcy you were driving it toward. And I'm useful enough to ensure that every single person in Richmond's business community knows that Edward Harrington was rescued by the woman he publicly humiliated." Marcus finally found his voice. "Natalie, please, we were married. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It meant something once, until you chose them over me. Every single time." I met his eyes. "You have until January 2nd to clean out your office. Security will escort you." I pulled on my coat, the same modest wool coat they'd mocked so many times. "Merry Christmas," I said to the room. "Oh, and one more thing. That forensic report I mentioned, copies have been sent to the Richmond Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg. The embargo lifts Monday morning at 9 a.m. You might want to prepare your statements. As I reached the door, Edward's voice cracked with desperation. Wait, Natalie, wait. We can work this out. We can make a deal. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. A deal. Like the deal you offered your cousin Jennifer when her daughter needed surgery 30 cents on the dollar, or like the deal you gave Tom Bradley before you forced him out. No, Edward, the time for deals is over. Please, Caroline begged, and for the first time in 5 years, I heard real fear in her voice. This is our home, our life. And it was my life you all tried to destroy with your casual cruelty. The difference is, I rebuilt myself stronger. Let's see if you can do the same. I opened the door to the snowy night. From now on, this family answers to me. Every business decision, every financial move, every public appearance, you'll do it knowing I'm watching, knowing I own the ground you walk on, knowing that the useless nobody holds your fate in her hands. The cold air felt like freedom as I stepped outside. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of arguments, accusations, and anguish. The perfect Harrington family Christmas was destroyed, and from its ashes, my empire would rise. As I walked to my old Honda, the car that would be replaced with a Bentley by New Year's, I thought about Edward's words from earlier. He was right about one thing. Success isn't democratic. Some people have it, some don't. The difference was, he never realized which category he actually belonged to. I drove away from the Harrington estate for the last time as a guest. The next time I returned, it would be as its owner. And when I did, I'd make sure Edward was there to hand me the keys himself. The snow continued to fall, covering the tracks of my modest car, erasing my path from their property. But my impact on their lives, that would last forever. They wanted me to know my place. Now they knew theirs beneath me, where they'd tried to keep me for so many years. Poetic justice never felt so satisfying. My phone buzzed with a text from David. The news is already spreading. 3 reporters want interviews. Global Tech wants to accelerate the announcement. You're about to be famous. I smiled, typing back, good. Make sure the Harringtons have front row seats to watch my rise. Tonight, they called me useless. Tomorrow, the world would call me unstoppable. Thank you so much for listening to this story of sweet revenge and poetic justice. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to hear in the comments below and connect with listeners from around the world. If this story of triumph over arrogance resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever fantasized about a moment like Natalie's? Sometimes the best revenge truly is massive success. Until next time, remember they can call you useless, but they can't stop you from proving them wrong.